All right, welcome to the April 11th meeting of the Planning Commission for Escondido. I'd like to call the meeting to order and stand for the flag salute. My understanding is that there are no written communications this evening?
There's none.
Okay, thank you.
Roll call.
Roll call, sorry.
Chair Barbet,
Present.
Vice Chair Paul,
Yes, present.
Commissioner Barber,
Here.
Commissioner Doan, Commissioner McCarroll,
Present.
Commissioner Spear,
Present.
Commissioner Weiler.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Approval of the minutes of the last meeting on March 28th. Do the commissioners have any?
You caught it too. Yeah, I have a correction.
Okay,
On item 1, it was I who seconded the motion. It's listed as Commissioner Wheeler seconded the motion.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
On item 1, Commissioner Paul made the motion. It was seconded by myself. It's listed in the minutes as it was seconded by Commissioner Wheeler.
Got it. All right, staff. So I would make a motion to approve the minutes with the change and amendment as Commissioner Barber just read.
Second.
Roll call.
Chair Barbet,
Abstain, I was not present.
Vice Chair Paul,
Yes, approve.
Commissioner Barber,
Yes.
Commissioner McCarroll,
Approve.
Commissioner Spear,
Approve.
Commissioner Weiler.
Yes.
Okay, I understand there aren't any oral communications.
No oral
All right,
communication.
so we will move to public hearings. The first one up being PL 23-0116, Grape Day Park Master Plan. So are there any disclosures relating to this item? No disclosures on the part of Commissioner?
I've been to the park before.
Okay, so staff is going to present?
Yes, good evening, Commissioners. My name is Joanna Axelrod. I am Deputy City Manager and Director of Communications and Community Services. I am joined tonight by my colleagues from LPA Design Studios. Arash Izadi is Principal, and John Courtney is our Project Manager. So we're here tonight to present to you the draft update to the Grape Day Park Master Plan and to request adoption of Resolution 2023-07, recommending approval of the master plan to City Council.
Okay, there we go. I'm usually loud enough. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity here to share a few things with you about the work we've been doing with the city on Grape Day Park Master Plan. So tonight we're going to be presenting the overall master plan update. We'll share some introductions, talk about the overall process and schedule, give you a little bit of a historic perspective on the 2015 plan, and then what has been changed and updated since then, including the process that we've gone through with the community and the various community outreach tools that we've used. And then certainly open it up to you to ask anything you deem appropriate. So the project schedule started back in September of 2022. Normally I'd go into the whole thing about what each one of these is, but we'll share that in a little more detail for you in an upcoming slide. But we had everything from in-house workshops with the staff to community-wide meetings to surveys to stakeholder engagement meetings, focus group meetings, We met with the Historical Commission, and that whole process took us through the end of the year, beginning of the year, and then we wrapped up with the last community meeting right around January, towards the beginning or middle of January. That brings us to the item number 7 on the screen, which is the commission and council meetings that we're at now. So this one is in April and May. We will be meeting with City Council. So back in 2015, there was a master plan developed that really became the foundation and basis for the start of our work. That was a plan that was not developed by us. It was developed by a previous consultant. What I'd like to make sure is clear is that this is not a new master plan process that we are doing. This is simply an update to that existing master plan. So on your screen, you'll see that the details of that. There's a whole lot of stuff in there. I don't think you need to see each one of those, because we'll go into some detail about what has changed from this plan. So going into the outreach summary, our goal in this is to engage as many people, or really provide the opportunity for as many people to engage as they feel appropriate. And so we use a variety of tools and methods. I can share from perspective. We work from Chula Vista to Eureka in California, and really across the country, utilizing community outreach processes and engagement tools. I will say that the process that the city of Escondido has gone through has been on the higher end of that outreach effort. I think the only one I've probably done more for is the city of West Hollywood, and I think we had something like 200 meetings when we were developing that project. So that's a lot. You guys didn't do 200, but you did really do a pretty extensive and thorough process from our perspective, and just to give you the context of that experience and what we do for other cities. So this shares a little bit about the different tools that we used, not in any particular order. We can go back to the schedule slide and go into the sequence if that's something you'd like to see in more detail. But the main, one of the tools that we use is a digital survey. This is an SMS survey, very similar to what you would have for election polling. It is a randomized and therefore scientifically accurate survey. It has about a 94% confidence gauge, if you want to call it. We sent out roughly about 8,500 of these. There's a service area established. Phone numbers are, we hire a consultant that does only this, right? They do it for these kinds of things. We sent out about 8,500 within the service area, so within the city. We got about 305 responses, and you might say that that's not a lot, and actually that is above what we normally would expect for that 800 or 8,500 outreach emails that were sent. So your response rate was actually pretty good. That one is, you may say that, well, I got one or I didn't get one, and that's the whole point of it. It's actually randomized very specifically, and not everyone does get that survey. But we always hear that exact comment, so as part of that, we allowed that, or it was decided to allow that, those same questions to be posted on the city website, so anyone that wanted to could then go onto the city website and take that same survey. It didn't get counted into the statistical portion of it, but it was counted just like any other community outreach event. So in the same way that we counted a community workshop or stakeholder meeting, the results of that were included in that as well. The difference on that is someone could sit there and say, hey, I got all my neighbors to go and do that survey, or you don't necessarily even have to be a resident of Escondido to take that survey. And that's why it's not included in the statistical portion, if that makes sense. So then we had a series of community workshops, 3 in total. We had about 76 total participants. We had some medium-sized ones, and we had a pretty good-sized one as well. There was 2 processes that occurred as part of this effort. What LPA was engaged for was to update the master plan, but also begin work on the development of the aquatic facility. So the meetings that we had were for both, but they were distinctly separate. So it allowed everyone to participate either in the master plan process or the aquatics process, or both if you wanted to. And that way we kept the information, and certainly the aquatics is part of the master plan, so people could comment on that, but when we got into the nitty-gritty of the aquatics, we didn't want that to overwhelm the discussion of the master plan piece. So people were allowed to participate in either or, and that way we kept the ideas and the discussions appropriate for that level of dialogue. We had a series of focus group meetings, and focus group meetings are usually small groups or people that represent a particular organization. As an example, the school district was a focus group meeting. The charter school group was a focus group meeting. And then we had a series of stakeholder interviews. These are individuals or very small groups, but typically individuals. We met with council members and philanthropists and others within the city and interviewed them to ask them their ideas and thoughts about the master plan and the aquatics facility. So a lot of different tools, small, medium, large, very specific, open format, digital, non-digital, again, to allow everyone to have a variety of different tools and opportunities to participate. And then we've been guiding us through this process is what we call the steering committee. That includes representatives from community services, public works, city manager, and a variety of different departments. We've been meeting with them in a certain cadence and really going through the development of all of these, getting feedback and input and ideas. And the very first outreach tool that we utilized was what we referred to as an in-house workshop, where we had practically every department, I think, within the city as part of that, and they were counted they were counted as one of the stakeholders in the project. So that brings us to here. We're at the executive input level. We met with the Historic Preservation Commission a couple weeks ago. We're here meeting with yourselves, and we'll be meeting with City Council next week, as I mentioned. Okay, this is called a word map. It's called word cloud. We played around with a lot of different ways to convey the input that we received. So we've got spreadsheets, we've got lists with quantities and numbers and so on. Whenever you have a list, there's a tendency, there's a difficulty in identifying where you draw the line, right? What becomes significant and what becomes insignificant. And it's really not our place to decide that. So this word cloud is intended to share the significance or the quantity of input that we received and how often we heard that. So many of you are probably familiar with this, but the larger the image is on the screen, the more people said tot lot in this example, right? So it doesn't say that there was 20 of those and 3 of the other because there's quite a number of these, but it gives you the idea of how often these ideas and thoughts came out and their frequency. And as I mentioned, we had the discussion about the aquatics as well. So they were kept separate for that specific reason. Again, people still comment on aquatics as part of the master plan, but we didn't get into the details of that in the same way that we did on the specific meetings. So on this one, the ideas of wet classroom, a splash pad, and things like that became significant items. So that brings us to the meat of this, which is the master plan update and the ideas and thoughts. So this gives you a little glimpse into our process and how we've worked with the city in the design process. So we took a step back and step up, however you want to call it, and started to look at how the facility is organized, how the Grape Day Park really currently exists. Each one of these, and the colors have no specific relevancy other than to distinguish one from the other. The aquatics being at the top, the creek through the middle, the arts on the left of your screen, the great green in the middle, or however you want to call the green, the civic area to the south, the focused play area with the equipment in the upper right-hand corner, and then obviously that historic piece in the upper corner as well. That gave us a little bit of context on how to organize some of the feedback and the ideas and changes. And then this is the updated master plan. Again, there's a lot of information here. This is in the packet that you received, and we can certainly go into as much detail as you need to. The intent isn't for you to identify every single one of these because some of them are consistent with what you had previously, some of them are new. So we'll get into the idea of what is new and what's changed and so on here. So we've got currently designed programs soon to be constructed. So part of this effort is there's projects that are already underway that have been approved that are ready to be constructed. There's ones that are in the works. Those need to be incorporated into the master plan. And then there's new ones that we have developed here based on the feedback and the input that the community has provided. So the items you see in yellow, the central restroom project, some of the meandering walkways, the food truck area or staging areas, the EV parking, charging facilities, some of the pathway lighting, and the concrete stage event spaces. Those are highlighted on your screen, and again, we can point at anything. We do have a mouse here if that's if you'd like to us to identify any of those key features. And then looking at the new programs, based on, again, those word clouds and the input that we received, the entry gateway, the preservation of open lawn areas, the public art opportunities, the picnic areas, the decorative fencing around the water channel, pedestrian walkways, heritage walk, and so on and so on. So there's a variety of items, and we'll unfold this in an upcoming slide here. John?
The first slide here that gets into a little bit of detail talks about the circulation and the key points of arrival when you're a visitor coming to the park, and how the hierarchy of that sense of arrival. So the red lines indicate where we're actually creating vehicular or service access for staff only, not for the public at all. So those will be controlled entry points for the service vehicles. And then the blue lines indicate the zones for pedestrian access throughout the park and at the entry points. Now we're going to zoom in a little bit and show you a little bit of the details. You can see in the center what we're highlighting here is the new restroom building that was shown on a previous slide that's already been in the design process for a while and now is being caught up with the master plan. But you're also seeing that, that walkway that connects everything north to south, and the food truck sort of bulb outs, if you will, so that there's an identified place for food trucks to actually drive into the park with a staff person, obviously, and be able to position the vehicle there for special events, things like that. Here you're seeing what the historic gateway or entry into the park site, and the idea would be it would be an actual physical gateway that you would walk under or walk through to really signify the importance of this historic district in this quadrant of the park.
And with the entry plaza, and the idea here is to, and again, part of the feedback that we received was to start to build on some of the patterns and paving and things like that that occur on Maple Street and carrying that into the park.
Mm-hmm. You'll see that that is a consistent design theme or concept here, is using that flat plane to be able to evoke what's already been started on Maple Street and use the materials almost literally on the northern side, but then in the spine through the center, that would be a little less expensive concrete, but it would have the same score pattern to follow the pattern from Maple Street. Now you see the concepts that are around the grove here with some accent seating, integrating art into the seat wall and also onto the fence that helps separate these zones. So ideas, areas for picnic opportunities that are all in this zone here.
And as you're aware, this is a master plan, so I like to evoke it as a 10,000-foot view of things. These spaces are not physically, specifically designed yet. Each one of these will be designed as the projects are engaged. This alludes to the idea and the features that would be incorporated into the project.
As we alluded to earlier, just a little bit more detail on that walkway. We're also sort of cleaning up the aesthetics of this area by suggesting that a common furnishings and furniture language or dialogue be established through the park, so that there's consistency in the certain areas, especially this one, which is the historic walkway. And then the fencing upgrades to be able to Again, bring some of the artwork potentially into the fencing design along the the historic area, but also along Escondido Creek as you're moving towards the west. Now you're starting to see a little bit of detail on the children's play area. You saw that as a real big feedback point earlier in the slide on our community input, providing some seating areas so that parents and caregivers or just visitors have a place to sit while kids are doing the play on the playgrounds.
Specific to that 2 to 5 year old, that was one of the prime feedback points.
Correct, right. And then the idea also of separating or providing some buffers along the sidewalk and the street between the play area, just for a little extra degree of safety and security for your kids who are playing on the playground. Now we're moving into the southern quadrant of the park. The concept of adding sport courts into the program here, that was something that was repeated over and over again, was where could some of the more active programs be placed in the park that would make sense with what's currently existing. So there were some ideas that came out of it that located them in other areas of the park. What we're trying to do here is maintain the integrity of the Great Lawn area, because that's a real festival area where special events happen, large crowds gather. And so what we're trying to do is leave that open field there for those large events to happen, and then use some of the other areas that are smaller in scale for some of these more active aspects of it. So again, maintaining really the character of what's currently in the park so that those special events are given really the highest priority over the life of the year of activities.
In essence, we didn't want to put the pickleball courts in the middle of the Great Lawn. Right?
Right. We'll zoom in a little bit on the aquatics area just so you can understand a little bit of the character of that. And what you're seeing here is a large body of water. That's one of the things that we've heard from a lot of the input. There'll be a couple of different variations on this, but what we're showing you is sort of the largest program of some of the options that have been presented. So you see a recreation pool with a couple of water slides in it. That's essentially sort of for all ages, all abilities, and it's great for swim lessons and those kinds of things, even water aerobics. And then the larger pool would be more for competitive swim, water polo, swim team use. And then you see some green spaces around it. They refer to that as the zoo, where people bring their pop-up shade canopies and hang out while the swim meet's happening.
I think the key piece here is that we've worked through a series of options. We've created a short list of those options. The city manager office, together with the steering committee, are reviewing those. The intent here is to show that the largest of those schemes does fit and can be accommodated in the facility.
And the last piece was something that you saw on that word cloud that talked about splash pad, and it said free. So in other words, we heard a lot of comments on splash pads, but what it was always connected to: make it available, make it free for the public to use. And one of the difficulties of doing that in the aquatics zone will be that would need to be within the fence, and it wouldn't necessarily feel like it's free, right? Because typically, there's a small fee associated with using an aquatics facility because the cost to operate it is quite high. So what we're showing here that there are some options that staff can consider as projects move forward for potentially locating a future splash pad. And one of the ideas is on the bottom right there, kind of in the center of the slide, is to actually located at a different park site. Again, it would be free. One of the aspects of splash pads is they have to be, by code, they have to be within 300 feet of a restroom facility. They have to have showers. They have to have all those facilities that you see on the list there on the top of the screen. In Grape Day Park, it's farther than 300 feet away from the restroom. So there becomes an issue with putting it in Grape Day Park. So we're providing the option of putting it in another location.
I think the intent here is that splash pads are conceived as pools from a health department standpoint and governing agencies, they view them as a pool. So you have to have showers, restrooms, changing areas, all of those things that you would have to have with the pool. So if it's a Great Day Park, the intent would be to put it within the aquatic facility. And so once you do that, now you're charging people to utilize that, and everyone said free. So once you pull it out of that facility and you put it anywhere else on the park, now you have to add all of those components. So once you consider adding all of those components, that really opens the door that is this the right place to put it? It might be, or are there other considerations throughout the city that we could look at as alternate options? So there'd be an aquatic facility here, maybe there's an opportunity to spread that within the city and locate it somewhere else. So that's become its own project essentially, and is not necessarily part of the aquatic facility. So here we'll open it up to you. Just put this overall image back on the screen. And just to go back to what Joanna said, the goal today is have the city staff recommendation of approving resolution 2307, recommending approval of Grape Day Park master plan to the city council. And I'll go back to that last image and open it to you.
Okay, so commissioners, questions for clarification at this point? Commissioner Barber?
I have probably three questions. In the master plan report, you cite that there will be demonstration gardens just to the east of the train depot. And in its description in our report, it mentions that it could be used by school groups or local residents. I was curious as to who's going to be coordinating that, who's going to be deciding who gets to utilize that garden.
That'd be a good question for staff, I think, later on. This is a master plan document, and it really provides opportunities for these programs to be run. So that's, the details of how that program will be run would really be a future consideration.
As part of the project, in the same way the aquatics would be, the operations of that piece and each one of these components would be resolved within those projects.
And conceptually, it would likely be run very similarly to how the community gardens are run within the city. So it's city-owned land, and then we have a lease operating agreement with a nonprofit that runs those gardens and operates them.
Very good. Thank you for that clarification.
Sure.
The pepper trees. The pepper trees it's recommended that they be removed and replaced along North Broadway. I was wondering if you can give me specific reasoning why we would be removing those trees.
Those have already been removed. Are you right? I'm pretty sure there was an assessment. Unless I'm speaking of the wrong trees, so I may have to circle back with you, but there was an assessment done as a follow-up to the 2015 master plan of the condition of the trees, and the diseased trees were removed.
Okay, so the trees that are here today are not.
No.
Okay, that's that.
Yeah, and we can definitely confirm that for you.
We're referring to the same.
My final question, which may be more of a thought, but I've always had a strong interest, if not a vision, for a pedestrian bridge to be constructed linking the Art Center in the Grave District to downtown to help enhance both drawing patrons of the Art Center to downtown and vice versa. People who might be spending an afternoon visiting downtown might then in turn cross the pedestrian bridge to utilize the park. I see a pedestrian bridge as both being convenient and safe, but I also could see it being, as I'm suggesting, a magnet to draw, vice versa. Was that at all considered by any of the special focus groups or anyone else involved in the discussions?
From what I recall, there was a lot of discussion about just general safety and traffic calming and those kinds of things in and around the park, both within the park actually and around the park. But I don't believe there was any dialogue specifically related to a pedestrian bridge.
Yeah, there was the focus group that we had with, I think we called it the Grape Day Experience. It was economic development, local business owners, representatives from the chamber, the DBA, is really where we got into some more detail around that, really making that connection from Grand Avenue and Maple Street into the park. And as Arash said, there was a lot of dialogue around the heavy traffic on Valley Parkway and, making that connection safer. So what you see on the plan where we've outlined the enhanced gateway, pedestrian crossing traffic calming areas are really to help address that. We did not discuss putting into the plan a pedestrian bridge.
So no one in any of the focus groups or anything brought it up for discussion?
I do have a recollection that someone mentioned that. I feel like it was one of the business owners from Grand Avenue. And so it was brought up and it was kind of discussed, but there wasn't widespread support for that, I think because it would be so cost prohibitive. I do remember it being brought up, and then it transitioned into a conversation around other safety concerns and how to make those visual connections between downtown and the park.
The dialogue was always about safety and traffic calming and access. If there was a comment about that, it was a singular comment about a bridge, and it wasn't something that, we did red dot, green dot processes, right, where you go and prioritize your things. That wasn't an item that came up in that. It was more the idea of safety was brought up as a general comment, and that was very significant. That was brought up consistently, but not specifically around the bridge, and it might have been a singular comment.
There was also, I remember, a comment, and maybe I'm confusing the two, but there was someone had talked about a wish to be able to connect the transit center via a pedestrian bridge to the park, and that's, it's physically so far away from where the park is. I think there was a lot of visioning. People were really, trying to brainstorm and as we asked, put out ideas. So that may be what I'm remembering, is that someone had brought up, how it would be amazing to have a pedestrian bridge that would connect people over Center City Parkway, as that is another very high volume, high traffic kind of area.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Spear?
Yes, thank you. Just a couple questions. One of them, and I guess I'm just trying to picture this a little bit in my head, but with the sports courts location, I understand the need or desire to keep it away from the green space there, but is there any, I'm just trying to understand the coordination between that and the theater. Is it a potential issue where you have people playing sports and conflicting with the theater location or the noise or anything like that?
We figured that's probably the most controversial item on here, other than maybe the splash pad. From a spatial requirement, from an orientation, from not, part of the idea was to not take away any other space, right? So there isn't a great place for that. Most of the theater activities occur inside, right? So this potentially could conflict if there's an outdoor program and there's, for instance, pickleball happening at the exact same time. That would be something that would need to be coordinated.
Yeah, and that particular location of the center is essentially that sort of white triangle is a walkway. So there's already a buffer between the facility itself and where the sports courts are. As Arash said, that theater, those events are all happening indoors. If there is going to be an outdoor event, it's further to the north in the Lyric Court area, or it's happening in that green space to the south of the art studios. So it's unlikely that there would be a noise conflict with what's happening there. The events that I have experienced personally, when there's multiple things happening in the park, there's often in that Great Lawn area pickup soccer games that are happening while there's an outdoor Center for the Arts type of event. It's just, it's a beautiful mix of multi-use activities that are happening in the park, and they seem to coexist very well. We're also not proposing lights on this. So again, most of the activities also at the center, they're not always happening in the evenings, but a lot of them do happen in those theaters in the evening time. So there shouldn't be any conflict with players playing late into the evening with lights on.
My next question is regarding the splash pad. And the logic behind that off-site programming sounds wise, but what I worry about is, I think you mentioned that this is essentially a pool and all of the requirements of a pool pertain. We're actually putting two separate pool facilities in is what we're proposing. So, and I'm thinking the costs of all of that, and the big cost being the maintenance, the lifeguards, the this, the that. What is the, I guess my question here is, where in this programming of the master plan, I know that some of this is conceptual. How conceptual is this, or how much are we getting into saying this is the spot, or this is a spot, a potential spot?
If I could just interject really quickly. So the reason that we started investigating other locations is because, as Arash and John have explained, there are all of these health code requirements that go along with having a splash pad facility. It does not necessarily have to be guarded. So the amount of water, and they will speak to this more in a second. I just want to clarify that there is maintenance, absolutely, and there are requirements for the types of facilities that have to be available to support the splash pad. But that's why we started to explore Grove Park, because there already is a restroom facility at Grove Park and an open space within 300 feet where a splash pad could go. So it's not to say that we would not have to take on the additional maintenance activities associated with a splash pad. Absolutely we would. And that would be a conversation and really a decision, a future decision for the council to make, to prioritize the operational funds to be able to maintain that ongoing. But of the options between locating it somewhere in Grape Day or locating it elsewhere where there already is a facility standing that could provide the requirements that the health code demands, Grove Park really started to elevate as a better option. And that will be further vetted and explored. That was not within the scope of what we have asked LPA to do. And that's why Arash was mentioning that this will be a completely separate project. But we wanted to address it in the context of the master plan because it's such a community priority. It comes up very, very often with council, with constituents, and it is a change from the 2015 master plan to what we have drafted and are presenting today. So we just wanted to make sure that the commissioners understand, that council understands, that the community understands, that we hear that feedback and we're not disregarding that feedback just because it's not shown on the updated master plan. We are internalizing that feedback and staff are looking at alternative ways to bring that project to fruition. It would go through the same process of capital improvement program procedures and approvals that any other parks project would go through.
So at this stage, how detailed is what's mentioned in the master plan here in terms of what's our placeholder for this?
For the splash pad?
For the splash pad.
So in the appendix of the report, there is much more detail on the assessment, why these various locations were deemed to not be ideal within Grape Day Park, and then the sort of acknowledgement that staff have identified an alternative location, but that we would need council direction to move forward with that. So there has not been any true assessment of the property in terms of, this is the size of splash pad you could have. It could have this type of amenities, et cetera. That would have to be sort of tabled for right now, and then we would have to receive council direction to move forward, because that's going to take another, partnership with a consultant to help us do that assessment and do those cost estimates, and another community process to go through, like what amenities do you want in this type of splash pad, et cetera.
So is this cartoon broad enough to say it could go anywhere at this point?
Yeah, I think to provide clarity, it is not part of the master plan for Grape Day Park.
It's totally.
And so there needs to be a project that decides where it goes and what it includes. Is it a $1 billion splash pad or is it a small splash pad? That's a separate project.
Yeah.
think that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Maccaro.
I would like to ask a question, and I hope it doesn't make me sound like a horrible person. But why does the splash pad have to be free? I know that people want it to be free, but why does it have to be? It seems like it would be a great location to have it in the aquatic facility. Why can't people pay for it?
It's an excellent question. We are simply reporting out the feedback that we overwhelmingly received. I think that dialogue is something that we need to have with the council, and that they could certainly provide direction, and that we could work through a costing model where it could be inside the facility and people could pay for it. It doesn't make you sound like a horrible person. It's an excellent question, and I think there's logic behind when you pay for something, you value it more, you know. So I don't have a great answer for you. The answer is it could be in that facility, and we could charge for it, but that's really at the direction of council.
It just seems like it would make the most sense to have in that facility a splash pad, you know, and create revenue for the city.
It does. And in the report that we provided within the packet, there is an assessment, a pros and cons of locating it in each of these various locations. So within the aquatic facility, you have economies of scale because you already have the filters and the pump room, and you know, you have maintenance staff that are coming because they have to maintain that facility. So there is a significant cost savings. You are centralizing your access to water resources in a 36 square mile city. So that is another consideration that council could undertake, is do they want to spread out these resources into more geographic areas of the city or centralize them? But it's an excellent question.
And just to share, it's possible the reason people are providing that feedback is because most people are accustomed to having splash pads be free.
Right.
There are facilities for sure that have splash pads as part of it, aquatics. San Diego has several. The city of San Diego has several that are in there. So it doesn't preclude the aquatic facility from having water features and those things such as slides and other amenities that are kind of splash pad-y, right? So that doesn't preclude it. I think what this says is that the splash pad's specific, because most people, again, you can go to, is it Sunrise Park or Sunset Park? Sunrise Park in San Marcos, right? You can walk up and you utilize that one for free. People aren't used to paying for that, so there's an assumption that if I'm going to go to a splash pad, it's free. Doesn't mean it has to be, but that's why we often hear that.
Sure. And then one more question. On the point of the pedestrian walkway over to, our Grand Avenue, what is the connection between the Maple Plaza, and is there anything planned for utilizing that access to?
That gateway area.
Yeah. It's just really important that we make that connection for people visiting the park, that there are restaurants and shops on our neglected downtown Main Street.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things we haven't talked about very much, but I think is one of the keys to this, is our signage. That park is absolutely undersigned. So we need wayfinding signage, we need better historical signage, things that, and that signage program should and will extend to Grand Avenue, because when you're standing on Grand Avenue, you also need to know that there's all these amenities just a few blocks away, and you don't necessarily know that. So I think one of the least expensive and most impactful changes would be a better signage program. The gateways, seeing a visual, it's one of the comments and conversations that we had in one of the focus groups was about how there was a gentleman who was here, has grown up here and lived here for 60 or 70 years. And back in the day, before City Hall and the Center for the Arts building were built, it was easy to see that there was a park there. But now we have these physical barriers that block access to it, visual access. And so LPA has worked really hard to come up with these concepts of how do we create more wayfinding for people so that they understand how best to get into the park and what value coming into the park really brings. So we're also trying to really make the visual connection with the design to continue that Maple Street feeling of I don't know what the designers call it, but there's, like the placemaking elements and, the concept designs of how that paving looks and the kind of mosaic sort of elements that harken back to Queen Califia and other really key elements that make Escondido unique, that speak to our heritage. The restroom project is really going to, tap into that with the grapevine motif and things like that. So trying to really make those visual connections, but I think the signage program is what's going to help people understand that there's more for them to see both ways.
I'm glad it's being discussed because it's critical.
Yeah.
Definitely needed. Awesome.
Other questions? Commissioner Weiler, Commissioner Paul. Commissioner Weiler.
Sure. First of all, I want to thank staff and LPA. I think you guys did a fantastic job. Looking at the public outreach that occurred, I think that was huge. And not only was it just a few workshops, there were stakeholders. There were a lot of people that have, I think, what appeared deep knowledge of, of the parks and what's needed, especially at the aquatic center. So I got to applaud you for that. Secondly, the timing. You guys did this really fast, and it looked like a lot of good input, and put this all together in something that seems like a very good comprehensive master plan. So thank you very much. I did notice that when you compare the previous master plan to this one, there were certain things that were removed, which in my opinion were very appropriate. They seem to be things that, may have just fell off the popularity list, and then they were replaced with things that are certainly more popular, especially the sports courts. I have to agree with Commissioner Spear. It seems like I understand the location of that, I truly do, but there could be those occasions where there could be a conflict. Parking is right there, it's nice and available. Personally, I'd probably like to see it over closer to Broadway and utilizing that parking lot. Even though I understand that parking lot, there's restricted parking for staff and such, I think that could be maneuvered around to someplace else. But yeah, that would be a big concern, is that, the concert goers or people at the theater, or even the museum, when they're trying to experience that. And then you've got these sporting things going on. And no, I've seen guys out there playing soccer too. So, what do you do? But that was just one of the things that I noticed. I agree with my fellow commissioners. I think the questions that they provided were spot on, and which answered some of my questions as well. So thank you. Escondido Creek. So, I've seen other concepts where there was a desire or a vision maybe to create something more of a natural environment out there. And I get the cost. The cost is probably astronomical to remove all of that and create something different, and plus it takes up a lot of land. But was there any consideration, and I get the cost on that, of covering the whole thing? It's covered as you go to the west, and why not cover it there and pick up that extra land for, if it would be the pickleball courts and you put them over there, or, other things that at least we could utilize that area. It seems such a waste of area. I get what it does. It's got to convey the stormwater, and it does a fabulous job of doing that. It's just not very pretty. And then the extra question, I was wondering if there was any consideration of that or any discussion? No. Okay. It's probably because it's cost prohibitive.
Yeah.
But I get
And I'm also project managing the project to improve the creek trail, so the 6.2 mile trail. So in case you don't know, we won an $8.5 million grant from the state through the Prop 68 Parks and Water Bond. And we've put additional funding into that to really improve the length of the trail. The bulk of the improvements will be between Broadway and, Rose? Between Broadway and Rose.
Got it.
Even in that conversation, we really, it is cost prohibitive, but it's really the resource agency permitting that I think is even more so prohibitive than the cost. And, just trying to get approval to go in and clean the creek. Public Works needs to go in and clean out that creek because things, fly into it and there's debris, and we have getting those resource agency permits to just maintain the channel is really, really challenging. So it's a wonderful idea, and I think that it would improve that space to be able to cover that up, but it's unfortunately in the investigating that we've done over the years, and it's not just this project that has investigated that. When the Visioning the Creek project was done in 2010, they also explored that, and it really seems infeasible.
No, and I fully understand.
Yeah.
I had one other question. Fencing along the Escondido Creek there, and it may have been in there and I just missed it, but is there going to change the fencing along the edge on both sides?
So the idea, if you look on your screen, that pink section north of the creek, the idea there is to upgrade the fencing and to do a kind of a decorative treatment on it where you kind of weave these colored pieces into the fencing, so it creates kind of a visual barrier, so you're not looking so much into the concrete channel, but it's also an opportunity for art. So it would replace the barbed wire chain link with something that's much more aesthetically appealing.
And as you had brought up earlier, part of the master plan does include a potential walkway that connects that area, and that's why that piece is highlighted as well.
All right, I understand. Again, thank you very much. I thought you guys did a wonderful job.
Thank you.
Commissioner Paul.
Yes, hi. I have a couple of questions. But first, I'd like to talk about Maple Street before I forget. So there is a connection to Grape Day from the Maple Street, and it's really not very inviting, like as my fellow commissioner said, and we could really spice that up. I mean, a few years ago, there was actually some trees in that parking lot, and somebody had a bright idea to cut those trees down, and we could fit 2 more cars there. But it really could use some sprucing up to be attractive, and like you said, having wayfaring signs to point back and forth. But on that same note, we got a grant to make that little plaza there, and I would swear there was a water feature incorporated in that plaza. Did we take that out?
So that's where we really discovered what the health code requirements are related to water features. So we were required by the county to turn it off, and we are investigating right now bringing back a water feature that would not be interactive. So you would not be able to touch it. It would just be a decorative, sort of column of dripping water in some way. So we are trying to bring something back to Maple Street so that we can spruce it up and continue to make those improvements, but it will not be a play area. It won't be an interactive water play area.
Okay. Yeah. So right, I spend a lot of time in the park, and I spend a lot of time in downtown, and I never would think to go down that plaza, back and forth.
Yeah, the challenge is really trying to make a better visual connection to guide people from when you cross at Maple Street over Valley Parkway and sort of dodge your way in between the city facilities. And that is something that I think as a project develops and gets funded, that we will have a lot more opportunity to talk through. We had talked about, and again in the focus groups, we had talked about art, using the sides of, those are essentially kind of public works exterior facilities right there. So using the sides of those buildings as canvases, huge entryway murals that say Grape Day Park this way. You could do so much with that. And so there will be future conversations about how to make that connection better, but we really want to try to get people to use the sidewalk and cut through straight into the park versus cutting through the parking lot, because not only is that unsafe, but it's not really getting people to where they need to go.
You could tear down those 2 things too, but
yeah.
So you should think about that with the pickleball courts. Are they going to make that pathway better or make it worse? It really needs to make it better. Okay, but I want to talk a little bit about the change from 2015 to 2023. And there's some projects you say that are underway. And those are not in the 2015 plan?
Correct. Right. So the relocation of the restrooms is probably the biggest one. So the restrooms, as they're shown on the diagram on your screen, are being relocated to a more central location within the park. And the existing restroom, which is very old, not to code, really gross if you've ever been in it, will be torn down. So that project and the associated walkways that would be built around it, the food truck bump outs, the stage areas that will support the special events that happen at the Center for the Arts, and also the special events that happen there in front of the train depot, that is an existing in-progress project. So it needs to be reflected in the master plan that's adopted by council.
So I don't think that this plan did a good job of addressing that. And that's why I bring it up. You know, it says those things are treated as existing, but they're not. I mean, there's some time frames in here for building things, and so they're not included in the time frame, but they don't exist yet. And budgeting, there's some things in here for budgeting, but those aren't included in the budget. So there's a little bit of disconnect there. And so the 2015 plan, were those bathrooms just going to be relocated and close to where they are now?
The 2015 plan just shows the restrooms as they exist now.
And I think we knew that they needed some work back then. So they were probably going to redone there. Okay. And you mentioned the pads here for the food trucks. And when I would go to events out there at the Center for the Arts and they had food trucks, there was like 8 or 10 food trucks at a time. And this looks like only 4 pads. Is that 4 food trucks? Or are those really big pads and we'll have 3 or 4 trucks per pad? Or what does that look like?
Our assumption is that there'd be most likely 1 truck at each one of those pads.
They could probably fit 2 if they're very careful about how they park, because they don't take up a lot of space. They can get really close to each other.
So I'm really not a fan of that, because that's just putting more cement on the green space, and it won't accommodate the trucks. So there was something else in the plan, and that was confusing too, about retail sales, and talked about the size of the park and the size allowed for retail sales, and I was really confused about that. And I got the impression that you couldn't have like 1 food truck have a contract because the park is too big or too small for that. I didn't really understand that. And
Joanna, correct me if I'm wrong. Apologies if I misspeak here. The restroom project, that connection, that walkway, and those pads are approved, permitted, and funded projects, correct?
Correct.
Right, so they were not part of the design effort or outreach effort that we went through on this master plan.
I can appreciate that.
We're simply just reflecting what those were. So that's why we have limited information on exactly how many fit or so on, so.
Sure.
Right, and just to clarify, we're not treating them as existing. We're treating them as previously approved, not yet constructed.
Yeah, so we may need to update that language if that doesn't come across clearly.
But by virtue of us talking about it, it means it needs to be clarified a little bit. So I think that's something that we need to address.
This master plan shows these elements as existing conditions.
Okay.
That's the language.
I'm sorry. So what public process took place to relocate the restroom and to make these pads and stuff?
I was not personally involved in that, so I can't give you the details. That project was approved, I want to say 5 or 6 years ago. 2019, not that long ago. So I'd have to follow up and try to get you some information on what that process was. I think the restroom project came before. Did it come before Planning Commission, or did it come before the Historic Preservation Commission?
I think
Do you
Commissioner
remember?
Weiler was the only person at that time.
No, I don't recall that coming before this body. I mean, it could have actually come forth through capital improvements or something like that, kind of passes this body and goes straight to city council. That's what I would assume, but
Yeah.
it didn't come through us.
I know there was significant outreach because I remember the Escondido History Center and the Historic Preservation Commission being very involved because that final location was not the original location. There was a lot of discussion around where the restroom should be relocated, and but unfortunately, that's all the detail that I know off the top of my head.
Right. I remember a lot of discussion about it, but I guess the master plan maybe should have been looked. Okay, I have a couple more items, please. Bear with me. There is a schedule for the improvements. It's broken down into about three different phases. Right. So phase 1 is 0 to 3 years, and what is the timing for the new restroom?
So it is in plan review right now. So the civil and I'm sorry, I'm not an engineer, but I know that staff are reviewing the civil plans, and the master plan needs to be approved so that the restroom project can move forward. So I don't know exactly, I can't tell you it's going to be constructed in 3 months, but I know that sequentially this action needs to happen so that that process can continue to move forward.
So it probably doesn't have a contract yet. Just keep cutting out.
No, I'm not sure.
So we don't have a contract yet.
Correct. It has not gone out to bid. We're still finalizing the design plans. Yes.
I believe it's currently in the permitting stage. So it has to have a building permit before the building can be constructed.
Correct.
I mean, you would think we'd have a contract then to build it if we have a building.
No, you typically, what I believe what everyone's saying is that the documents have been generally done, the construction plans have been drawn up. That usually goes in for permitting. Once the plans are permitted and approved, then it goes to bid, and then there's a contract awarded for construction.
Okay, so that'll happen in this phase 1, 0 to 3 years.
The assumption is yes.
All right, and it says new aquatics facility, 0 to 3 years. Demolish of existing restroom, maintenance entry. So what does that mean? Maintenance entry.
That's this entry on the south side of right down here.
What are we going to do there?
So right now, that's simply a dirt pathway. That's how Public Works accesses the parks to minimize the amount of disruption that they make to the turf. That would be formalized as a service entry. That's a concrete. Paved. Thank you.
Okay, and then children's playground area, 2 to 5 years, and ADA walkway to Grape Day Park. So where was that going?
Yeah, so that's on the northern end of the park where the pedestrian bridge is that crosses over the creek. So not the Center for the Arts, but the other pedestrian bridge. Right now, that's not ADA accessible. So that needs to be upgraded and made ADA accessible. And then as part of the restroom project, as part of the aquatics facility project, part of that design will be to make a stronger connection between the aquatics facility and the park. So that's part of that bigger design concept.
Cool, great, thank you. And then phase 2 is 4 to 8 years, the Heritage Walk and Entry Gateway, a DG Courtyard. Where is that?
Yeah, that's the area up here.
Up there. Okay, where the trees are, cool.
Correct.
Pedestrian walkways and lighting, I guess, is throughout. Veterans Memorial improvements.
Yeah, these areas in here,
We're getting some new monuments?
just improvements of that area, make it more accessible and clean it up a bit.
Cool. And picnic tables, so that's relocating them along the edges.
Right.
Traffic calming enhancement, street paving along Valley.
Parkway.
And is that the Maple Street thing?
Correct.
Oh, cool. New irrigation drainage, okay. Landscaping buffer planted along Broadway. And then phase 3, 9 to 20 years. So that's longer than the life of this plan was. Concrete walkways adjacent to the train car and the north side of the Escondido Creek. Concrete walkways adjacent to the train car.
I think that's that, correct?
That's up, that's the pink.
Oh, way up there. Oh, okay. Sports courts. So that's the pickleball 9 to 20 years from now. Nice. Escondido Creek fencing. Remaining enhanced landscaping areas and traffic calming. So there's no splash pad because there's not going to be a splash pad here. And I think that's all of my stuff. Oh, I did want to point out there is some of the community input about this that you put in here. These all the little dots, and the splash pad was up there. So I think we need a splash pad. My personal opinion. Thank you very much.
Okay, any other questions? Commissioner Spear?
Sorry, just to follow up, I know we had a really important discussion about the Maple Street connection. And in that discussion, it was the point was made, good point, that future development needs to take place and there's opportunity there. My question then is, for what we're doing today with this master plan, how locked, with that anticipation that maybe, hey, we could do some really nice stuff in connecting through here. And a good point was brought up, hey, there's another kick into where the location of the sports court could actually interfere with what we may want to choose to do in the future as well. How locked are we into the location of the sports court with what we're talking about today? Are we locking that location in, or are we not locked in?
I believe the master plan is showing the general location.
Just general.
So if it moves 20 feet this way, or 10 feet that way, or 30 feet that way, as long as it fits, I would assume that would be within the constraints of the master plan. If you were to take it and move it up to where the tot lots are, that would not be consistent with the master plan. But if it's in this general area, I think it would be within the purview of the city to say that's in general conformance or not in conformance.
Okay. So there is some general shoving it into this sort of area with what we're doing today.
I like to use the analogy, if I'm on a plane and I looked out the window and I see what's there, that's what this is showing. It's showing where things are, right? Not exactly the detail of each one and whether it's 10 feet this way or that way. That's kind of the way I look at it.
Yeah, a master plan is a guiding document. Nothing's going to be built directly from this piece of paper or screen, right? It provides a pathway for future implementation. And to your point about the phasing, we needed to generate some high-level conceptual phases to kind of show how it could happen in the future. This master plan could get updated later on, So, but what we're trying to do is reflect the input that we've gathered from the community in a plan that, collects that and shows it in a, physical form so that it can be considered in the future for construction.
And yeah, those phases can also be redirected by council. If they give direction that they want the pickleball courts built sooner, then, that's just direction. But what LPA was trying to do was, knowing that as a city, we have a lot of financial constraints, it's very unlikely that we'd be able to build out this master plan in one fell swoop. So we had to start breaking things down based on priorities that we've been hearing, and then those priorities can be changed by council. I did want to ask Andy, so to the question of how locked in are we with the master plan, if we got to a point where council said, yes, we're going to build sports courts in Grape Day Park, and again, we have to go through the whole design process, the outreach process, the feasibility process, all of it. If they were to move to, let's say, closer to Broadway, whoever brought that up, is that still in conformance with the master plan, or does it really have to stay like adjacent to the CCAE?
Sure. So from my standpoint, I think there's two really key pieces to this master plan. You have the community outreach, which has been addressed to a great length here. A lot of the surveys, a lot of the input in terms of what the community is looking for in the master plan. I think that's captured in your document tonight. There also are the programmatic elements, what is in the master plan, what is intended to be built over the coming years. So I think those are really the key elements of this plan. It is intended to be a refinement of the downtown specific plan, which in itself is a refinement of the general plan. But in terms of its execution, there are other planning documents, other processes for those. From my standpoint, when I look at this, I would look for consistency in terms of, is this a use that was contemplated when we developed the master plan? If we talked about sport courts, I would be looking less at the location and more, was this something that was captured in the community input as part of that outreach and participation process? Is this something that was contemplated and considered when we were developing the program for the master plan itself? And I think if we saw that sport courts were considered, we would consider alternate locations, provided that it was not inconsistent with something else that was shown on this planning document. It's a tool. It's not the end-all, be-all. This is meant to really facilitate discussion with the community and with the key stakeholders as it has done. And from this point, I think that we would be looking for continued refinement through those subsequent processes to determine with greater precision just what happens and when. And for the Planning Commission, I would suggest that if there are recommendations to the City Council, whether this is, say, that the location of the sport courts or even the implementation schedule, if you're looking for, let's say, the wayfinding signage or the connection to the Maple Street Plaza to be accelerated, I think that's an excellent comment that the Planning Commission can capture in its recommendation going forward to City Council.
Commissioner Weiler.
Sorry, but as we're discussing this, other questions kind of come up. One of the questions that's come up, and it's probably for staff, as we were discussing the location of various components of this, when it gets closer to actually implementation, and yes, this is exactly where we want to put this, and here's the design aspects that we're looking at. It sounded like it's going back out for more public input. But is that going to come back to this body for a final, yeah, we agree, that's a good spot for it, and the design looks appropriate? And it's just not that I am suggesting that we place that in here. I'm asking that just as a course of what the city does as a part of this process, does it come back to this body? That's okay. If we don't know today, that's all right. It's a curiosity. And point being is if it does, and that is the thought process that it comes back to this body, that if something happened to move, well, that would almost seem like the appropriate time to go through a master plan amendment, so to speak, to go, yep, we agree, it should be moved, and it should look like that, and it shouldn't be there where it was originally approved, but maybe over there because of whatever other extenuating circumstances. So anyway, I don't expect an answer, but it was part of my thought process as we're discussing.
If I could just clarify, because consistency, I think Andy was absolutely correct, but consistency can be very fact-specific. So when you're looking at a master plan, if something were to if staff wanted to move something wildly in another direction, we would probably be looking at having to update the master plan. If you're going to move it a little bit, you're probably fine. But the issue of whether something is consistent with the plan is going to be really fact-specific, and we're going to have to take a look at it when that happens. But just broadly, those are the strokes.
With respect to the question on whether this would come back before the Planning Commission, I don't believe it does.
Unless there was an amendment to be made to the Grape Day master plan, correct?
Right.
Yeah, which is what you were saying. Okay.
Then would it be best if there's a consensus, for example, that we would prefer to see the sports courts relocated? Should we include that recommendation in a motion?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, other? Commissioner Paul?
Well, yeah, and I think that's the point about the splash pad too. The splash pad is being removed from this plan. So there's no consideration for where it's going to go in the future. It is gone.
Okay. Okay, so I just have a few questions and observations. One is, in your vision statement, the very first thing you have here is integrating the creek into the park's environment as a natural element, reminding us of the force and beauty of nature. I really take really significant issue with this because I see absolutely, there's two pieces that you have here. You've got some art-based fencing, which is very nice, perhaps. And also you've got the trail improvements based on the 8 million plus whatever you've added to it for the trail enhancements based on other work. But my real issue here is that there is absolutely no recognition of the importance of the creek, the history of the creek, the importance of the creek to the region historically, agriculturally, and so many other things, as well as the natural aspect of it, of which it's not natural at all. Recognizing that, but that in itself is an educational opportunity, if you wish. So my concern here, I really have a hard time with this one, largely because I don't know if you actually had any conversations with the Escondido Creek Conservancy and all of their different pitches, if you will, over the last 10 years with ways to do just what I'm speaking about.
Yeah, the Creek Conservancy was represented in one of our focus groups. The connection will really come through that signage program. And, aside from moving forward with one of the Escondido Creek Conservancy's vision concepts, which has not gained approval or direction from council. What we're left with is the opportunity to try to educate through signage and the creation of those kind of pollinator gardens and, trying to draw that connection and make it feel more natural through the landscaping and the way that we educate the people about what the creek is. And even though it looks this way right here, here's how the whole ecosystem works together. So again, that's not detailed specifically in the report because that's a future element that will be designed and have more general input as that starts to be developed. But your point is well taken.
Yeah, my point is also, it's just literally no reference to that whole body of work. I mean, there were 3D animations. There was a large effort to look at the gateway that we've been talking about with overflights or something. I mean, I just remember some really cool animation that showed just what that Maple Plaza gateway could look like if, obviously it requires resources, and we all know that these things are resource intensive, but they are a very good partner, and they could conceivably draw in many other partners to at least move some of these things forward, probably over a 20 to 30 year time period. But when you look at other cities who have done so much work with their waterways to both for public participation, to enhance economic development, et cetera, in so many cities. I mean, waterway development is like the way to go, right? And yes, you've got to deal with the federal, the EPA or whomever regulations, and we know that the concrete has to stay there, et cetera, but there are ways to get around that. To work with it, I should say. And nobody seems to be even thinking about it or even having it in there as a future. And that's my issue, even as a future enhancement or consideration in the plan, and I think it needs to be there. That's my only concern. So, moving forward.
Well, thank you, because, that just made me look at this map in a broader scale. We have the Boys and Girls Club over here, and it looks like an afterthought that's not part of the plan, and even the California Center for the Arts and City Hall down here kind of looks like it's just the neighbors of the park. And maybe it would be better if we looked at the whole page holistically, as this whole page is Grape Day Park, and think about how the interaction is. And then maybe we wouldn't have so much of a trouble getting across the street to Maple Street if we looked at the whole piece of paper that way.
There definitely was consideration of this whole block area from the zoning sort of exhibit that we showed earlier. Representatives of the Boys and Girls Club and the Center for the Arts were involved in our stakeholder meetings and our focus group meetings, so they've been part of this conversation from the very beginning.
Sure, I don't doubt that at all, but I mean, when you look at the piece of paper, it kind of looks like they're not really included in the thought. I know that they were involved in the discussion, absolutely.
Do you have specific recommendations for how that could be better indicated?
Well, I mean, if you just look at the parking lot, we've included all this parking lot as part of the park, and they have put green trees in there. Do you see any green over here by the Boys and Girls Club? No, it's all black and white. That's what I'm saying. It's like it looks like it's not part of the park. The diagram.
And from my perspective, certainly the enhancements include the reference to public consideration engagement around some of the proposals of future enhancements where we take a piece of that parking lot, extend it, and really build a creek. I mean, these plans I've seen, but to build a creek immersive experience for the public, whether it be walkways or little waterways or whatever. So anyway, those plans are out there, and I'm just really surprised they weren't included. And I agree I agree with Commissioner Paul that there could be sort of an overall theme to it somehow. But that's just in your presentation. That's not certainly, I mean, in your pictorial presentation, not necessarily in your writing. Your writing is integrated otherwise. Other comments, questions? Actually, this was really questions. We now need to open it up for a public hearing. If there are no more questions or comments from the commissioners, questions, I should say, for clarification? No? Okay, so I'm opening it for public comment. Seeing none, I will now, unless you're aware of any, no. I will now close the public hearing, and now we can go to deliberations amongst the commissioners, if there are any more deliberations.
Okay, I don't really care about the sports court location so much as the timing. That that may never happen. The things that are 9 to 20 years from now, and I'm really disappointed that the splash pad is not here. The community wanted a splash pad, and we went through the whole process, and we said, we know you want it, and we end up at the end of the process saying, but too bad, you can't have it. I'm really disappointed in that part of it.
Okay. Other comments for discussion amongst commissioners? No? And just for the record, I also am really disappointed in the lack of attention to the creek, aside from the great work that you all are doing. But there needs to be a lot more emphasis, even in the planning process, so that there's a placeholder there for more things to happen without a significant amendment is just my concern.
I guess, and we didn't, I don't know if we sort of begged the question, but maybe it wasn't a part of the goals, or it wasn't something that was identified as a desire to look at redoing that whole creek there purely because it's cost prohibitive. I certainly get what you're saying. As a planning process, yeah, we should be looking way out. But this master plan was done back in 2015, and here we are, 7 years later? And we're looking at it again. Not to say that in 7 to 8 to 10 years that we won't look at it again. And as a part of that, maybe rules, regulations, or funding or grants might be more available that we can go after, so that expanded vision of going to what the plans that I've seen, where, yeah, you eliminate all of that concrete, put it back to a natural sort of state, and still convey the water in a safe manner, that couldn't be looked at again. So I'm just saying that maybe that just wasn't a part of the direction that staff and LPA was given at that time.
Right. I don't remember what the process was to bring that plan to the public and show it, but I saw it too. But I don't remember what the process was. But you would think there could be a discussion in here about that, right?
Oh, no, I totally get exactly what's being said here.
All right. Other comments?
Stress that connection to Maple Street Plaza for our, Grand Avenue downtown definitely needs to be looked at, planned for properly for that gateway into the park. To not see that in greater detail is also really disappointing because it's such a fundamental, way into the park and to our downtown. And I get that the wayfinding will happen, but I think visually it needs to be represented a little bit better just so we can have confidence that it actually was thought of. That would be the only thing I'd add.
Thank you. All right. So do we have a motion?
I do have a motion to approve with a deferment of the location of the sports court to coordinate with future Maple Street planning. I don't know how we should word that, but those are my thoughts.
Is there a second?
Could you clarify how the coordinated with the Maple Street planning? That's the part that I'm confused.
Maybe that's too much detail for the motion. Maybe the motion should simply say the precise location of the, or I don't know precise, but the location of the sports court should be deferred.
I would second that motion.
Could you repeat the motion in its entirety?
To approve the plan with the exception of deferring the location of the sports court.
And you had a second on there from
Yes, I seconded the motion.
Commissioner Barber. So roll call, please.
Excuse me.
Oh, sorry.
Could we, and this goes back to Robert's Rules of Order, can we have discussion before the vote? I mean, is that appropriate?
Yes, we can.
Okay, because I fully support what Commissioner Spear is saying, but in listening to other commissioners, I would like there to be a little bit more added to this, which would be not that there be a change to the exhibits, but an added section or paragraph about the creek and the ability to take a look at that at some point in the future for an enhancement, whatever that may be, as Chair Barbier had indicated. Yeah, I think that's important that gets included, as well as more attention to the crossing there at Maple. Because I want to support the motion, but I kind of want there to be a little bit more.
I agree with you. I think all three of those elements we can combine. How we word them, I think, is important. I think we've addressed the first one. How we word the second being the inclusion of consideration for development of the Maple Street connection. Is that maybe a way to word that? And the
Say that again. Consideration
of, oh, how did I say that?
I wouldn't even say consideration. Our recommendation is to
Coordination for future development of the Maple Street connection to Grape Day Park.
or explicit.
And then regarding the creek?
Hang on. So include consideration of the connectivity.
Coordination for
Coordination.
the future development of the connection between Maple Street and Grape Day Park.
Okay.
And
Connection.
the third being the creek. And what is our interest there? That there be, we're trying to put a placeholder for consideration of
Future enhancements, basically.
Okay.
Right? That's what we're talking about. I think at this point, unfortunately, I think we have to keep it fairly broad. So future enhancements to the Escondido Creek, period, the creek. I could say the creek corridor, I suppose. What was the first one that you said? That was about the splash pad, was it?
no
No, that was about the courts.
sports court.
That
the
deferment?
deferment of the location of the sports court.
Okay.
And we're still kind of missing the splash pad.
You're right. I think
I think that, you know, those comments are great feedback, but I have put my, crystal ball to work here, and I can picture the city council meeting and staff says, and for future developments of the park master plan, we're going to think about maybe adding these things that the planning commission brought up, and nothing's going to get changed.
Well, that's their prerogative. I think.
No, I mean, that,
Well, I think
okay.
Andrew had suggested that we provide recommendations to council going forward based on our review of the Grape Day Master Plan. So I think those would be, our recommendations would be for council to consider deferment of the location of the sports court to, I'm just checking my language here.
That the plan be modified before it's approved by the city council?
That's, yes.
I mean, I don't think that staff is going to make that recommendation. They'll say the planning commission said that, but staff thinks we can do that in the future.
So the preface would be that the planning commission recommends to council that these 4 items.
Is that what you're thinking?
Or are you
No,
are you
I
suggesting
think we
don't do any
should,
of it?
I think you should tell them to change those things and bring it back for our recommendation.
That's what I was going to vote no on, yes.
Oh, to bring it back to.
Oh, no.
Right.
So you're suggesting to add that they bring it back for our revisit?
Yeah, to fix the things that we found deficient.
Commissioner
Can I
Barber?
just- just a point of order. Can you just clarify for me, are you suggesting, Commissioner Paul, that staff would you would be directing staff to do this and bring it back, or are you recommending council direct staff to make those changes and bring it back to Planning Commission?
I'm saying that the planning commission had so many issues, they do not recommend it be approved. They recommend it go back and be redone.
Okay, I just want to clarify because council can direct staff to do that. Planning Commission can't actually direct staff, so I just was clarifying.
I was just hoping for some feedback from Andrew.
I'm not sure what to offer other than I think there is a motion to recommend approval that has been seconded, and I understand that Commissioner Weiler has asked for some clarifications, so I just would call that out and perhaps ask Dare to address that as well.
Yeah, you're correct. There has been a second for that motion.
That's why I was headed to a roll call.
Yeah, so I think we might need, if the commissioners need reminding of what that actual motion is, we might want to repeat that motion and take a vote on that before another motion is made.
Based on the discussion that took place, would you even consider withdrawing the motion?
I would withdraw the motion.
Okay,
And I would rephrase the motion.
okay, and I withdraw my second.
Okay, so that's cleared up. So given that the motion's no longer on the table, do you have any comment back to, who was it? Commissioner Barber asked you for any feedback on process, was it?
So I think at this present point, this is scheduled for a May 17th presentation to City Council. And the master plan, it is both a planning tool as well as a tool that is being used by the city community services to program uses, projects within the park. And it is my recommendation that the Planning Commission use this opportunity to inject ideas, opinions, to share that with City Council for their consideration at their hearing on May 17th. In my opinion, I think that is where you're going to be most effective in terms of how you're communicating and conveying your comments and concerns specifically on this master plan. This is a little different than a lot of the documents, a lot of the plans that come before this commission. Master plans in the zoning code, it's a little bit of a different animal in terms of how we develop parks and open space. I think the purpose of this document, as I described in some of my remarks earlier, it is to capture that community outreach. It is to program uses within that park. And it is to be used as that regulatory framework for future projects that come into the city. Those are then put through a separate process, much like the restrooms that we discussed earlier, going through the site civils, going through a building permit process. So I don't know that the Planning Commission is going to be as effective in asking for the council to redirect this back to the Planning Commission for additional review. I would suggest to the Planning Commission that the discussion tonight and your recommendation tonight is likely the most effective means to offer comment on the master plan itself.
I would like to reframe my motion unless there's more discussion that wants to be had prior to doing so.
Yeah, just a point of clarification from staff and what the intent here as it relates to the splash pad, because there was a lot of discussion in the master plan in various sections about the splash pad. And is the intent, and because it's not on the schedule, right? So I don't think that was the intent to remove it from the schedule. It may have been an oversight if it's not there.
They're recommending it go to Grove Park or some other location.
Right, so that essentially the splash pad is no longer in this park.
Right here.
Therefore, the Grape Day master plan no longer includes it, because this is a plan for Grape Day Park, not for other places.
Okay, so, and that helps if that's the actual recommendation of this master plan as it sits right now, that the recommendation that is that it's, the splash pad is not here, it's in Grove Park. Is that correct?
Staff is not making a clear recommendation of which park, but staff is recommending that it not be in Grape Day Park. So there will be, and if this helps with the conversation, because the capital improvement program budget is also coming forward in the next couple of months. So there will be a project within the capital improvement program budget for a splash pad, right? To do all the things that we're talking about, the assessment, the evaluation, determining a location, et cetera, the design work that's needed for that. So I know there was concern about this falling off the radar and then, staff never moving it forward to build a splash pad. So I just want to reassure you that it will come forward to council and to the community through the capital improvement program budget process. It's just, you are correct that this is a master planning document for this park. And as the recommendation and the assessment has been, this is not the most ideal location for the splash pad. That will move forward in a different process.
Okay, because that does make a difference. Because if the community is saying, we want a splash pad, we want a splash pad, but when you go through this entire process, it seems like the recommendation is, we hear you, that's something that can be discussed, I guess, further, but it's not going to be here.
That's correct.
And that's the recommendation.
That's
So,
their recommendation.
and so for me, I guess I don't have a total problem with that. It's not here. I just want to make sure that council hears that that's the desire from the community and it's going to be located somewhere. Because that got lost with me. I could be the only one here that got lost on it, but I just don't want that to get lost with members of the city council that, yeah, it's a highly desired, it's just not a good idea to put it here. According to staff and all the feedback and all the things that you consider. So
Would that be something that you would like to see as a recommendation, or at least a mention in what we send to City Council?
Yeah, and I think if you probably, with the presentation, if it can be made clear, I think how our fellow commissioners had read this is, yeah, it's not going to be here. That's not the recommendation. Okay, that's pretty clear. But we want to make sure that the message to council is, it's a highly desired amenity in the community. We want to have it somewhere. And that will have to be figured out at some point in the future, I guess, but it's just not going to be here.
That's what they're saying.
Yeah. No, I get that now. So, thank you.
Or there's a Plan B that was recommended or suggested by Commissioner McCarroll that it still be located at Grape Day Park, that it be incorporated into the aquatic center.
Yes, there was that suggestion, or potential. Right, with a charge. So, Is there ready for a motion? Mr. Sperry, you said you had a motion in hand?
Motion. I do extend a motion to approve the plan with the 3 exceptions that we wordsmithed previously, which was different from my first motion, I believe. So those are the 2 facets that I do approve. I do recommend we approve the motion with those 3 city council recommendations.
Those 3 being a deferment of the location of the sports court.
Right.
And to include coordination, explicit coordination for future development of the connectivity to Maple Plaza.
Yeah.
And lastly, to include that to include a placeholder for future enhancements on the Escondido Creek corridor that could be to emphasize the natural area.
I would second that motion.
Chair Barbe,
I'm going to say yes.
Vice Chair Paul,
No.
Commissioner Barber,
Yes.
Commissioner Maccaro,
Approve.
Commissioner Spear,
Approve.
Commissioner Weiler,
Yes.
and we have 1 absent, Doan. 6.
That's 5 yes, 1 no.
6.
Correct. We
Okay.
should say the result.
The results are 6 to approve and 1 deny.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you to LPA. Is that that's your acronym, right? Thank you to LPA for your presentation. Appreciate it. And for staff to come out and help. Really, really
Is
much.
it necessary, excuse me, I'm sorry, Chair, to clarify, the vote was actually 5 to 1.
You're correct.
Yes.
My apologies, it was 5 to 1.
Thank you, Commissioner Barber. Okay, all right, moving on to the next item, which is, all right, that closes public hearing. Now we'll go on to current business. General Plan Annual Progress Report, PL 23-0027, to receive and file the General Plan Annual Progress Report for the 22 calendar year, including the housing element, Annual Progress Report, and the Climate Action Manual Monitoring Report. Ms. Morones.
Yes, good evening, Chair Barbe, Planning Commissioners. My name is Veronica Morones, Principal Planner, and the current business item before you tonight is to receive and file the General Plan Annual Progress Report, which includes the Housing Element Annual Progress Report as well as the Climate Action Plan Annual Progress Report. So just a bit of background, the General Plan APR as an umbrella holds 3 different annual progress reports. 2 of these annual progress reports, the General Plan and Housing Element APRs, are required by the state and have a deadline of April 1st. As you're aware, today is past April 1st. However, city staff did present the annual reports before the city council at the March 22nd council meeting and submitted those reports subsequently to the required agencies prior to April 1st. Unfortunately, staff was not able to complete the reports prior to a date that allowed us to present before Planning Commission and then subsequently to City Council. Staff anticipates that will be corrected in 2024 for the 2023 annual reports. And so for the third item within this umbrella report is the CAP monitoring or progress report, which is required by our climate action plan and is not a state required annual monitoring report. So the general plan APR outlines the actual implementation of the general plan document itself, which is a very large document, as you're aware. There is no prescribed format for this, so jurisdictions can choose to present the information however they see fit. However, the housing element APR is on a prescribed form that is mandated by HCD, the State Department of Housing and Community Development. And then the CAP APR is, again, no required format and just provides information on implementation of that document. Oh, I apologize for the formatting on the title of this slide. So the general plan annual progress report contains a number of different report outs on the general plan. As part of it, we look at information on current and future updates to the general plan, as you can see in this table. So city staff is currently working on amendments to 4 elements of the general plan: the housing, mobility, community protection, and community health and services. These amendments are more substantive in nature and require comprehensive work efforts. So it is anticipated that in addition to those 4 more substantive updates that are currently underway, the land use and community forum element will also be amended in 2023 to accommodate the city's rezoning efforts for the East Valley specific plan. So that would be coming later this year. So just general accomplishments from 2022. The city initiated several programs, one of which was a city-specific SB 9 or Senate Bill 9 ordinance to accommodate 2-family dwellings and ministerial lot splits consistent with state law. Adoption of our annual zoning ordinance cleanup, which is brought forth each year to address things like errors, typos, consistency issues. We completed the first phase of outreach for the 2022 general plan amendment work effort, which is an update to our community protection chapter and creation of a new environmental justice element. We adopted a VMT exchange program, which allows for streamlined CEQA review on development projects and includes a mitigation program. And then from the private development side, just a few highlights. Palomar Heights, they broke ground, they demolished the hospital, are in the process of grading. The Villages project continues to be developed with approximately 92 homes receiving building permit issuance in 2022. And then the city received a development application for a Costco and service station at the former Sears building at the North County Mall. So for the housing element annual progress report, that specifically looks at the city's progress towards implementing our housing element as a document, including our programs, as well as our progress towards RHNA, which is our regional housing needs allocation. So on this table, you can see that in the 2022 calendar year, we were able to receive building permits issued, which is the threshold that counts towards meeting progress for RHNA. We issued 231 units. Excuse me, there were 231 units issued building permits in 2022. So this table shows that of those, you can see a breakdown of affordability levels. So 25 were in the very low category, 39 within low, 13 within moderate, and 154 at above moderate. This table simply shows that same breakdown, the aggregate breakdown counting towards our 6-cycle progress in percentages based on affordability levels, and provides you some additional information regarding what those affordability levels mean. So a lot of times we say very low income, moderate income, but we're not really sure what those might mean. So this just shows you what that area median income threshold is, as well as the actual dollar amount as detailed by HCD's state income limits that they establish annually, and then how many units out of our regional housing needs allocation that we have actually issued permits for, and what that total percentage is. So for example, if you look at the above moderate line, we've issued building permits for 704 units above moderate affordability levels, and that is 14% of our total 4,967. So moving on to our climate action plan. In 2022, we did not achieve completion on any CAP action items. So the pie graphs that you're about to see, the pie charts you're about to see, outline the CAP action items and the year they are scheduled to be complete, and whether or not we have completed them. They're ongoing or underway, and I apologize on the formatting of my slide. The red means that they have not yet started. So in our climate action plan, for items that were scheduled to be complete by 2020, 2021, 2 are currently complete, 5 are ongoing or underway, and 10 have not been completed. That is the same as last year's annual monitoring report. 2022, again, is the same as last year, as we didn't make any headway. We don't have any 2022 scheduled items that were completed. 7 are not yet started. And then looking ahead to 2023, right? So next year you'll receive a report on 2023 implementation measures. For those that were scheduled for 2023, only 1 is complete, 5 are underway or ongoing, and 11 are not yet started. So I apologize for the brevity of that, but that concludes my presentation. And if you have any questions, staff's available.
Great presentation.
It was very succinct. Comments, questions? So I do have the question around all of this red business, certainly in 22. I mean, is there any hope for some movement? Having been a member of the group that worked really closely with Mike Strong on this years ago, seems like we were all perhaps too ambitious, I guess, but at least the thoughts are there. But is there any hope of movement? I'm thinking in particular that I understand a climate commission is certainly cost prohibitive for the city, but it strikes me that some of the actions is my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Barbay. So as you have probably heard more than once, especially from me, capacity can be challenging and an issue. The planning division does have an open position right now for an associate planner that would support the long-range planning activities. So we are hopeful and anticipating that having an additional staff member to help with these action measures would facilitate more implementation and allow for more education throughout the city and staff to allow for other divisions and departments to make more headway. Additionally, there is a lot of funding coming down from the Inflation Reduction Act surrounding different opportunities that could fund action measures within our climate action plan, and we definitely are paying attention to those. We are working with our staff grant writer to monitor when guidelines are released. None of those have had application dates roll out as of yet, but we are looking to those to help support things like an urban forest management plan. And then additionally, there is regional efforts underway to try and coalesce climate action planning and help jurisdictions who are experiencing exactly what we're experiencing, which is just capacity and funding concerns. So the city does work with SANDAG and the San Diego Regional Climate Collaborative in their working groups to learn about new opportunities, see what other jurisdictions are doing, which does help us facilitate the planning that is necessary to implement some of these items.
If I can add to Veronica's comments. So the red in her presentation certainly creates a visceral reaction, and it had the same effect at City Council as well. This was a comment that came out from city management after that meeting, and really is a recognition that Veronica does an exemplary job in this role, in this space, and we're doing more to support advanced planning within the Development Services Department. But it's not solely her responsibility, and it's not solely the responsibility of the Development Services Department to execute this. This falls on other departments as well, and I think those other departments perhaps have not reported out as much as they should have in terms of recent activity, initiatives, efforts that they have underway. And I think that's a strong message for the commission as well. It's not just Veronica, but these are efforts that are being led Public Works Department, within fire, within other areas of the city in close coordination with Veronica. And that's one of our goals internal to the city and within city management, is to do a better job representing and reporting out the work that we are doing to support Veronica and this team within the CAP implementation. So certainly there is a strong reaction to be had from the presentation that we haven't started a lot of this work, but I think this time next year we should be in a stronger position, both from a staffing standpoint as well as an internal communication and coordination standpoint, and reflecting more of the work and activity that's going on elsewhere in the organization that perhaps has been underreported or underrepresented.
Thank you. I appreciate that, but I totally understand that this is a whole of staff effort in order to make some headway on a lot of these climate actions. But it also does require leadership and support from all levels. And so I'm just making that point because, yes, I'm totally aware that it's not Veronica's job to do the entire climate action plan, but I do think that with some additional real leadership in this particular arena, given the challenges that we're facing in climate change, that it would be more than warranted. Thank you. I think it's all about prioritization, right? All right. Any other comments about this one? Okay, so receive and file, correct? All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Veronica. Great presentation, as always.
Thank you.
Future agenda items.
Yes.
Do we have any?
You have a memo in your packet outlining some potential upcoming agenda items. I believe you will have at least 3 items on your next agenda. And as well, a question came up from the commission about bylaws and the election of officers. We will look to agendize that for your next meeting.
Right. Okay, so there will be a meeting on the 20, whatever that is.
Yes, April 25th.
April 25th, okay. Any other, no oral communications, I assume?
No?
Any other comments from the commissioners? Future agenda items or otherwise?
Thank you. I do have a comment. It's kind of timely, but then she just ran out. She always does that to me. So I'm on the Community Advisory Commission for the Clean Energy Alliance, and I guess it's timely because you were just talking about that. So there is an opening right now for a member from Escondido, if anyone is interested, and I'll throw that out there. But I also wanted to say that there's also an effort to create local programs on how to utilize the funds that used to go to SDG&E that'll now come to the communities. And so I'm working really, really hard on that. And at our last meeting, the chair said they want to do a demonstration project. They want to do something like to be the first project. And so I'm trying to get Escondido to be the location of that first project. So if anybody wants to help me and be on that CAC committee, that would be great.
All right, thanks. Any other comments? Anything else from the planning? Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Weiler?
Just an announcement. So the Chamber of Commerce is hosting the Transportation Exposition. That's going to be on the Saturday the 25th, I believe.
Actually, I think the 25th.
22nd? Sorry. Let me get that date correct here. Oop, I'm in the wrong month. The 22nd. Wait, I'm on the wrong month again. Nope, I'm in the right month. So it's Saturday the 22nd. And so they will be, they are hosting that. Sandag's going to be there, a lot of EV vehicles and demonstrations. I think there will be a few classes that will be held, and that's all held down at the mall. So it'll be a good day, kind of starting at about 9 o'clock, and it goes all day long. So.
Commissioner Maccaro?
In case I haven't had a chance to invite everyone in this room to Old Escondido's historic Mother's Day home tour, if you would like to attend, I would love to have you as guests, you and family or friends, if you'd like. It's Saturday, May 13th, and I think it would be a great opportunity for the Planning Commission and city people to come and see why it's so important to protect our historic community in Escondido, and there's some great houses on the tour. So if anyone would like to go, please let me know, and I'll put your name down for tickets. Wonderful.
Great. Thank you very much. All right, seeing no more comments or observations, this meeting is adjourned.